Hello everybody, and welcome. It has been nearly 10 years since the last installment of the Dead Rising franchise. It's been missing for so long that legally it can be considered, well, dead. However, the death of Dead Rising did not just come out of nowhere. Dead Rising 4 was so unbelievably bad and mishandled that it's often looked at as the sole reason why Capcom hasn't even made a peep about the franchise since. It's safe to say that Dead Rising 4 single-handedly killed the whole series. It stripped a lot of features that made Dead Rising unique, and it absolutely butchered Frank West as a character, making him feel like a total stranger even to diehard fans. Because of this, Dead Rising has faded from the public eye. However, Capcom finally decided to give Dead Rising a little love and has put it back into the spotlight with Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, or DRDR for short. Over the past couple years, there's been a trend in the gaming industry to remake older games that have been released. This has been seen with games like Final Fantasy VII and Demon's Souls, but most notably with the Resident Evil series. Capcom has been combing through their back catalog of games and have been reviving them to great success. For years, it has been so hard to see Capcom ignore one of their most beloved and classic franchises when you know that Dead Rising would be perfect for a remake. But now, fans finally have something to hold on to. One last grain of hope for a franchise that has been dragged and beaten through the mud with mistreatment. But does this mean that Dead Rising is back among the games of the living, or will it secede back into forgotten obscurity, only to be revived another 10 years later? Well, darn it, I hope not, but let's get into it and find out. This is Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Alright, now for starters, I just want to give my thoughts on bringing the game back as a whole. This isn't called the Dead Rising Remake, no, it's the Deluxe Remaster. Now, I like it when games get remastered. It gives people who may have missed out originally a chance to play and experience it for themselves. But this isn't just a remaster, it's a Deluxe Remaster. What exactly does that mean? Well, to be honest, I have no fucking idea. Capcom has been killing it with their remakes of the Resident Evil games, so why didn't they go all out and remake Dead Rising instead of just remastering it? Don't get me wrong, things like you would expect to see from a remaster are here. The game looks good, like really, really good. You can see all the little wrinkles and pores on people's faces, and the mall itself has never looked better. There are set pieces that you can find that weren't in the original, like the huge dolphin statue in Paradise Plaza, and the outside area looks refreshing and relaxing, despite the hundreds of zombies walking around. It really makes the Willamette Parkview Mall feel like a luxury and high-end shopping center. However, considering how long the franchise has been gone, I feel like a proper remake would have been more appropriate. Still, the marketing and hype leading up to the Deluxe Remaster was handled really well. I'm also a fan of the naming route that they went for the remaster. I know it's kinda weird, but Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster sounds like Capcom was trying to capture some of the goofy naming conventions that they've had with their past games, namely the Dead Rising 3 DLC Super Ultra Dead Rising 3 Arcade Remix Hyper Edition EX Plus Alpha. They even take it one step further. I got the Digital Deluxe Edition, so that's Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster Digital Deluxe Edition. DRDE Erectile Dysfunction ABC Edition, oh my god. It's also worth noting that it came out on September 19th. This matches up when the game actually takes place. The first day in 72-hour mode happens on, September 19th. It doesn't really add much, but overall, it was a nice little inclusion. But one of the biggest things that had me worried was the changing of the voice actors. Now, I know that complaining about some voice actor changes may seem a little shallow. You can make an argument that it has no effect on the gameplay, but these are characters that have been around for nearly 2 decades, and Frank West especially has an iconic voice. Dead Rising 4 had me that messed up where I was super worried how he would sound. But honestly, it was more of how the character was portrayed and written that was bad, not the voice. So I thought that as long as Frank's character remained the same, his voice would follow suit. And you know, I was right. Even from the beginning, his new voice fits. Sure, he sounds a little different, but the tone and delivery by the new voice actor fits the atmosphere of the game and is enhanced by Frank as a character.
Yeah, well, I'm freelance, pal. I don't make my living waiting for the TV to tell me what to cover.
Yeah, well, I'm freelance, pal. I don't make my living waiting for the TV to tell me what to cover.
Shout out to Jas Patrick, by the way, who voices the new Frank. I thought he did a great job. If I could say one thing about the whole voice change though, is that allegedly, the reason why TJ Rotolo, Frank's original voice actor, did not return was that he wasn't even asked by Capcom to reprise his role. To me, that seems like a bad faith act on Capcom's part. They just must know how beloved Rotolo is as Frank by fans, and to not even ask him to return for a deluxe remaster seems, fucking stupid. Even so, Patrick did a great job of bringing Frank to a new audience. Speaking of the new voices though, I would say that most, if not all of them, are really good. In case you didn't know, literally every character was revoiced in this game. Sometimes I wasn't even sure if they were changed. To complement the voices, there is now full voice acting across all the characters. In the original release, all of the important cutscenes were voiced, but out in the mall, survivors just made some noises and they only spoke with text that you had to read. Now, even the most minor encounters with survivors are fully voiced. It's a great new addition. A deluxe edition. Speaking of additions, I want to highlight some of the new changes that came with the remaster. The most important change comes from the saving system and how time has changed. In the first game, you can only save at the security room or in the restrooms. Now there's an autosave that happens every time you load into a new part of the mall. This mitigates a lot of the difficulty. I found myself getting got a few times during my playthrough for this video, and if this were to happen originally, I would have lost a couple hours of progress. Instead, thanks to the autosave, I just lost a couple of feet. That is insane. The first game was pretty brutal if you didn't save frequently, but that was where a lot of the challenge came from. Finding time to save on top of the time limit led to a lot of stressful, but rewarding situations where you were rushing to make a deadline for a certain scoop, but were super relieved when you saved a survivor or even just saved just in the nick of time. Now you can choose to reload from your last actual save, but damn, the temptation is real, and I personally never found myself doing it. Thankfully, the time itself and the challenge that comes with it has not changed. The only notable change is that you can fast forward time in the safe room now, which is nice if you have only like an hour until the next case, but I wouldn't recommend it since you could be exploring and getting PP to level up in the meantime. But if you wanted to, you could go like total phantom pain mode and just skip everything here if you wanted to. This feature actually trivializes Infinity Mode to get the notorious 7-day survivor achievement from what I've heard, but I haven't actually tried this for myself yet. However, with all of these changes, the game is still hard. It's not as hard, but I did die a lot, and I even got myself the D ending and wasn't being careful. The special forces will still stunlock your ass to oblivion. Oh well, glad I can just revert to an autosave before I was captured to get the true ending. Now the biggest and most controversial change to the remaster is the censorship. What is Capcom doing? Are they turning the franchise into woke rising? Have the liberals invaded Willamette? Now this is a very contentious topic. On one hand, I am not a fan of censorship just as a principle. I think that content should be viewed as intended by their original authors, and that goes from books all the way to video games. I think that it's harmful to shield people from an artist's vision, no matter how controversial it may be. And besides, it is an M-rated game after all. There's a precedent already to protect people from the content that's in the game as a whole. I mean, that's the whole point of the ESRB, to give people a heads up on what they're playing. I don't think that a 4-year-old should be seeing a grown-ass man suplex a zombie into the ground, no matter how awesome that might be. But a grown adult not being able to see a satire on American society because the corporate overlords don't want them to? I'm not so sure about that. Now let me just explain. Yes, there are certain scenes that have been changed from the original release to appeal to a modern audience, but I'm finding myself conflicted on what actually got censored, and I partially feel like people are blowing certain things out of proportion. The censorship can essentially be boiled down into two changes. One is the removal of the erotica category when taking pictures with the camera, and the other is the changing of specific dialogue and certain character elements that were present in the original release. Now, regarding the erotica category, it was a very fun and humorous aspect of the series and helped to set the serious but goofy tone that it became known for. Originally, there were 5 categories of photos that Frank could take, being brutality, horror, outtake, drama, and of course, erotica. Each of these categories would net you PP that you can use to level up, but even without the erotica category, there are still plenty of opportunities from pictures that you can take to level up. And it's not like the game prevents you from taking risque photos, it just doesn't reward you for them, nor does it, oh hold on, I seem to be distracted, sorry, give me 1 second.
Good.
Of all the changes, this is definitely the weakest one, and it doesn't have a big effect on the game as a whole. It's with the other changes when you begin to see a notable change to the context and lore of certain characters, for better and for worse. The most obvious and notable change is to the butcher psychopath near the end of the game, from the race of Asian to white. Dead Rising has always been filled with over-the-top stereotypes, and really, whether Capcom likes it or not, it's become a staple of its identity. To remove one of these aspects from the original game would be sacrilegious, right? The race swapping of the butcher might seem like a stupid and pointless change, but it actually has some narrative effects for the story in a good way. The whole point of Dead Rising is to be a satire and commentary on American consumerism. Americans themselves have been historically stereotyped as being driven by consuming the newest and greatest trends and by having a need for material possessions above anything else.
Don't ask questions, just consume product.
Except now, instead of consuming products, people are consuming people, i.e. the zombies. Did I mention that the game takes place in a mall? So changing the butcher from Asian to white actually makes narrative sense. He's not just a dumb Asian butcher, now he's a dumb white stereotype who is obsessed with meat, which is how the zombie outbreak started in the first place, and strengthens the ironic twist to Carlito's death. Oh, sorry, spoilers for an 18-year-old game, my bad. No, the most egregious change that I actually don't see any point in is the change to Cliff, the Vietnam vet psychopath. Would you try to argue that a shoe is not a shoe? I mean, it goes on your feet and protects you from the elements, usually goes over your socks. Would you try to argue that a shoe is not a shoe when it's that obvious? He literally starts his conversation with you by saying name and rank, soldier, and then proceeds to call you Viet Cong and a communist. So why is the game trying so hard to make him not appear this way? It really is baffling when you consider that the Red Scare and fear of communism, more importantly the other, is so ingrained in American culture. And you can argue that Vietnam isn't as relevant as it is now as it was back in 2006 when the game was originally released, but you know, my grandpa served in Vietnam and he's still around, and also, the game still takes place in 2006, so why would it be any less relevant as it is in the game's own world? Now instead, he calls you a mole and a filthy animal. Capcom, are you implying that communists are animals? That's racist!
That's gotta be racist, there's no way.
This really just seems like a pointless change, and it lessens the emotional impact that it has on Cliff as a character. But the reason that people are complaining about things like this is something that was actually brought back to light about the first Dead Rising by this remaster. Replaying Dead Rising 1 for the third time on my channel made me realize just how well the base game and narrative holds up. The opening does an excellent job of building tension, and the 72 hours that the game takes place over bolsters the pacing of the events that unfold. The cutscenes are handled at a slower pace compared to games nowadays, and it makes the time limit and events that take place in the mall feel even more important. Seeing this in 2024, where so many games feel like they're oversaturated with over-the-top set pieces and Twitch cracked out moment-to-moment gameplay, feels like a breath of fresh air. Dead Rising has characters that are so fleshed out, and to see the context changed regarding those characters feels like Capcom has gone back on what made them great to begin with. It almost feels like a betrayal, like fans have come to love these things about the game, only to see them be removed when introduced as a deluxe remaster. If I had to give my input on these changes as a whole, I would say that the remaster doesn't lose anything substantial, but it does lose a lot of flair and charm that came with the original. Gamers aren't clamoring to take lewd photos of survivors or set pieces because that's the main objective of the game. No, that's not the point. It was a very minuscule and optional aspect to begin with, and the absence of it damages the integrity of the series coming back as a whole. However, despite these changes, I am in no way upset about Dead Rising coming back. The other changes, like there being an actual ramp to the safe room, fully voiced dialogue, faster load times, and graphical overhauls, completely outweighs the negatives that come with it. Oh, and also, Gone Guru is back. The game is still so much fun, and this is arguably the best version that the game has ever seen. It's at the very least better than the Wii version. That was a joke, by the way. It's 1 billion times better than that. I just hope that people don't overlook it because of the out-of-this-world crazy censorship that it received. It really is unplayable because of that, guys, believe me. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the changes that came with the remaster, but a very minor pro and con are the awesome costumes that came with the game if you got the DRDR ABC GT Kai Digital Deluxe version. The costumes that came with this version unlock new remix mall music that correlates with the costume when you're wearing it, and it's a nice touch, but this is not a deluxe DLC by any means and should have come with the base game, no matter how fun it is running around with these costumes. I'm actually very pleased with how this deluxe remaster turned out, despite its shortcomings. I had fully believed that the franchise would have stayed dead forever, and we would have never seen another installment. At least with this remaster, Dead Rising has a final hope, a final chance at coming back in some way or another. Even if Capcom decides to remaster 2 and 3, it would be welcome, but I really hope that they take the franchise in a new direction and breathe some new life into it like I know it deserves. But what do you guys think? Is Dead Rising worthy of being given a second chance, or should they shelve it like they have been doing for the past decade? Let me know in the comments below. All I will say is to be vocal and let Capcom know what you want out of this franchise. I know I am. This is one of my favorite franchises after all, and I would love to see it go out with a bang rather than a whimper. Alright everybody, I hope you all have a good one and be safe. I will see you all next time, and don't forget to drink some orange juice.